We had probably taken, it was my first year as head coach, I'd taken arguably the strongest team to the competition, and we found ourselves in the final, and we were 3-2 down. There's 4 chukkers in hockey. It was the 4th chukker. There was about 5 or 6 minutes left. We thought we were still in the game, and then the following happened. We were the team in white. All right, the reason why I show that clip is because we had come so far and we were so close, yet that was the nail in the coffin. We ended up conceding a goal. My goalkeeper got sent off. My new goalkeeper had to come on, hadn't touched the ball the entire tournament, try and make a save, and we lost the game 4-2. And I thought to myself in that moment, what do we have to do to win? And I realized that the small things make a big difference. So that was the moment there. And the reason why I show you that clip, not because the goalkeeper takes the player out, because in that 20-second clip, every single thing that I discuss here today can actually be drawn there. Tactically, there were problems there. We were physically not strong enough to deal with things. There were coaching issues there, and there were decision-making issues there. So upon reflection, I came up with the following things we needed to change. Because we ran a pretty strong program, I'd been left a very, very strong program. Firstly, as usual, you've got to start with yourself. So we had to do a bit of coach reflection. I had to look and reflect on the team and their identity. We had to look at recruiting and what players we need, because a lot of my players left at the end of that. They were at the end of their university cycle. We needed to monitor our athletes a little bit better. Strength and conditioning was something that was very important to me, that we needed to be better. How do we use technology more effectively, okay, to make that small difference? And then lastly, and I'll elaborate it on later, is an approach that I adopted from Paddy Upton, the whole book approach. It's probably one of the most successful things we implemented in our program as well. So you don't need to write those down. We'll go through them as we go. So from a coach's perspective, I knew that in the program I had to look at myself, because there's no point in trying to change the program if I was the problem. Okay, so it's very difficult as a coach to admit that you're wrong sometimes. I had to go and do the dreaded thing and go ask people for feedback. In particular, a lot of players who were leaving me. And I had to ask them to be honest. A lot of things came up, but 2 things that were most important was that I was too controlling. So I tried to control everything, and that more from a tactical perspective, but also off the field, and I haven't changed that, all right? And that I was too conservative in my tactics, and yes, I probably was, because I was setting up not to lose rather than to go win the game. And I still believe defense wins you championships, but attack wins you games. So in my self-reflection, I realized I have to trust my players more. I have these fantastic players, and I put them in boxes. They can't do this, they can't do that. Not allowed to do this. The next thing, I had to take a few more risks. Now, that doesn't mean just go play, go forward, right? We all know that that doesn't work in sport. What we actually had to do was we built a very solid defensive base, okay, but I allowed my players more freedom going forward, particularly in the final third of the field. Okay, I allowed them to do whatever they needed to do. And then lastly, and this is an important one, and I struggled with, is you have to delegate. You as the coach can't do everything. I couldn't be the fitness trainer, the video analyst, the specialist goalkeeper trainer. I couldn't do sports science, and so on and so forth. I needed to delegate. So I made sure that my assistant coach compliments me. He wasn't a yes man who just agreed with everything that I said. All right? All his strengths are probably my weaknesses and vice versa. So we complement each other in that regard. All right? I had to delegate the sports science to someone else who actually knew what was going on. Not just me, because fitness and strength and conditioning are 2 different things. So we had to start there. After we did that, right, we went on to the culture and team identity. It's something that Alistair talks a lot about. For me, this is the most important thing in any team. It doesn't matter how good you are tactically, what players you have, how good your sports science unit is. If you have the wrong team culture and team identity, none of those things work. And I don't think it's my place, because this is a whole new session that we're actually talking about here, but I don't think it's my place here to talk about this, particularly when we've got the likes of Alistair in the mix. But there are a few things that I really want to discuss. We Didn't have a bad team culture, and we didn't have a bad identity. We had a few problems. One, we had a fear of failure, definitely. The second one was that there were a few people who it was about them and not about the team. And lastly, we never had a team identity. We often played the way the opposition dictated. We had fantastic plans, but it wasn't the way we played. So we needed to change that. So as my mentor coach, Mr. Mark Besher, always used to say to me, you've got to sacrifice the me for the we. And that's the first thing we had to do. Change a few. Get rid of a few players that needed to get out the system. All right? The last thing, whatever your identity and your philosophies, because they're all going to be different, and I must just say our team decided what the culture was, not me as the coach. We sat down, they decided the non-negotiables, they decided what was going on, they decided the team identity. All right? Maybe me a little bit on team identity because I could recruit the right players, but the other thing is, it's all nice to have all these fancy slogans and this motto and all that, but you actually have to go out and make sure people are living it, and you as the coach have to live it as well. And not just at the training ground. When your players leave and they go into everyday life, they have to also live those values. They can't just be like that at the training ground. And that for me is the most important. And we trained it every single day for 2 years. In every single session, we trained with our principles and our philosophies as themes to our sessions. And sometimes, all right, you're going to have to lose the battle to win the war. And you cannot compromise on these, because these are standards that Alistair was talking about. And if you compromise once, it's done. It undermines the whole process. So sometimes you have to make hard decisions. I had a player, got in an altercation with the bouncer in a nightclub, got punched. I didn't matter if it's his fault or the bouncer's fault. He should never have been in that situation. That's what we decided. The team put a sanction, 2-game ban. That's it. Right? One of our top players. Hard to play without one of them. Team put in that sanction. That was fine. All right? Lost that battle. We won the war in the end. All right? My captain spoke during a game. I gave him information, tactical information. He turned around. He said, I am doing it. I said, you're not doing it. Please do it. He went like this. Luckily, in hockey, we have rolling substitutions. Off. Come and sit on the bench. He sat there the whole game. I can't remember if we won the game or not. But after that, when we went through the video and he saw it, he stood up and he apologized to the team for his behavior because he's the leader. All right? And to this day, and he'll talk here tomorrow, to this day, we haven't had an issue. And with anyone else in the team, because he was someone who sets the tone in the team. So you have to make those hard decisions as a coach. It's tough, because I know you want to win the game, but think of big picture, the end product. We needed to recruit. We had the best team available, but the 11 guys that I had on the field didn't complement each other. The balance was all wrong, which meant I had to play people out of position. So I had to play strikers in the midfield and at the back, and midfielders at the back, and it really doesn't work. So we knew when the new players that we get in need to fit the balance of the team. And I always say the best is not always the best. I mean, look at Pogba in United. Fantastic player, but I don't think he fits in there. So we didn't necessarily go and get the best players. I went out and tried to get the best players that suit the way we play and what we wanted. And what we had to do was, the first thing is check the balance of the team. What type of striker do we need? We can't have all the same. What type of player where are the areas in the field that we need? What specialist skills do we need to win the game? In hockey, penalty corners, goalkeeper. Right? Do we have those personnel that can execute at that time? Intelligence is a difficult one because it's not your smart as in a book smart. All right? I'm looking for intelligence, people who live the game, who understand the game. I can't have players who are just very good skillfully but don't understand the game. They're very difficult to coach, particularly in a tactical environment. And it becomes very difficult. And if they have a low EQ, they usually disrupt the team as well. But also from an academic standpoint, I needed people who were going to, because the Varsity Cup competition has an academic, the parameters that the guys have to get certain amount of credits to be able to qualify. So I couldn't work with people for 2 years, and a week before the competition they say, well, academically, he didn't get enough credit, so he's out the system. Then I have to replace him. Then for 2 years, it's been a waste of our time. So I had to, from my point of view, I had to do that. And then lastly, I always look at physical attributes. If you look at my side, generally big, strong guys. I like to put the opposition under pressure and the opposite of me. So I look at that as well. And then the underlying thing is the character. There's no other way to say this. He has to have a little bit of balls. So when the chips are down, what is he going to do? And you can usually gauge that from a conversation. So a lot of the times we had to say, sorry, this is not the environment for you because I don't think your character suits our team. And because we did this, recruited properly, we created depth. Now, one of the problems was I had 11 good players on the field, but I couldn't make a substitution because the players that were coming on, and all due respect to them, weren't at the required level. So then it puts the team at risk, which means I have to play players for too long. With depth, creates competition. Now the players who are really good know that they can't just, oh, well, coach always plays me, so it's okay. If I don't have to compromise on our team standards and on their performances because they know someone's pushing them and someone will get in. And if you have the right team culture, this is very, very good. The wrong team culture, it's a problem. But the right team culture, competition is good. So that's what we did there. I had no information about any of my athletes, which was an issue for me because we see them sporadically, for example, and I don't know what they've done in that day or the night before or so on and so forth. I needed to monitor my athletes somehow. Luckily, we had the SmarterBase system, which is a screenshot of what I use the most here. Dr. Helen Bain, she'll be talking about it in more depth tomorrow. But ultimately, all it is on a daily basis, the guys check in on an app, and all the information is, it's a hub of information for me as the coach, sports science units, all the medical units, physiotherapists, so there's no lack of communication. So if the player, after a session, puts his rate of perceived exertion in, it starts giving us all types of information, and my sports scientist will then change their training loads. If required, if there's an injury flag, or you'll tell me my session needs to taper down, or we need to increase it, or this player needs to stay out of a session, or so on and so forth, we need to rest them. From a medical perspective, if they're injured, they go see a doctor. That diagnosis is there for the physio. The physio then can see that diagnosis, and from there work on rehabilitation with the sports science and the bio units and so on and so forth. Which means that when they come back to me, I don't go, what did the physio say? No, I'm fine to play. And then they play and they break down, and I go to the physio and say, what's going on? And they say, well, he was supposed to be out for 3 weeks, and he was supposed to be doing rehabilitation. But that's not the message the athlete gave me. So there's a lot of things like that. But this is the most important thing for me. So on a daily basis, they do a check-in. You can see there they answer questions about their energy and stress and so on and so forth. And over here, it gives you a well-being score. So at the end of the day, I can see how my athletes are feeling before the session happens. Practical example of this is one of my athletes is a med student, second-year med student, and I saw he had low sleep hours every day, 2-3 hours, or 4 hours, sorry, and high stress levels, and I could see it in training, and it looked like he was about to fall down and cry, and that's not usually how he is. And he would never have ever approached me about this. And I went to him, Redders, what's the problem, my boy? No, really under pressure at university. Take the week off. And in that way, he felt like he could take the week off and come back refreshed, and we were all happy with it. That would never have happened if I didn't monitor my athlete. On the flip side of the coin, I can see if someone's had 3 hours of sleep every Thursday and he doesn't train properly and he's got low stress levels, I know he's been in the pub the night before. So we can address that as well. I haven't told them that this is how I know. I told them about spies in the bar. Probably the biggest change that we made was in our strength and conditioning. So in 2016, we had testing. It wasn't used to set up our programs. So our programs were really general, one size fits all to our players. All right, and this led to a lot of injuries. In fact, we had major injuries. We had 3 people with meniscus injuries and 1 with an ACL injury, a couple of hamstring injuries. And ultimately, I couldn't play for 40 games in the season. I never had my strongest team on the park. And that for me is a problem. And when they were on the park, the 11 strongest players, a lot of them were carrying injuries and we had to manage them. And what it did was it started to dictate our tactics. So now at the start of a competition, I knew I have to play deeper, okay, a little bit less tempo so that we can manage our players so no one gets injured for the end of the tournament. And I don't like that as a coach. I don't want to think about that. So we changed that. We got Justin Swan, who's in here, involved. He adopted a scientific approach. He really got stuck into the program. It became player specific. So the training came down. He could work with players on a one-to-one basis. So goalkeepers had different training sessions to guys with different deficiencies, but that's a scientific thing that Just can talk about. And ultimately, through this year, we didn't have one injury. I was expecting one or two. We had no injuries in over 40 games. And a lot of these guys put a lot of load on here. So it now starts to complement our tactics. We can play the way we want to play all the time. High tempo, high pressure, all the time, because I know my players are fit and strong enough to do it, and consistently I have the best players all the time. Then if we look here, and this is probably the theme of this conference, is how do we use technology? So we used it pretty well in video analysis, something that probably our strength is video analysis, and it's something that I want to say to all coaches at any level. If you're not using video analysis, I think you're missing a trick, particularly with the athletes that we coach today. They are visual, they're not like us when we grew up. If your coach tells you to do something they don't necessarily agree with, you need to show them. And it's not difficult. So from a video analysis perspective, we're pretty good in terms of feedback, in terms of tactical, setting up tactically, analyzing the opposition, and also from biomechanical perspective in terms of skills and stuff on the park. And one of the ways I also used it was I used to clip clips and put it on WhatsApp. So on the team group, just clip the clip, put it on WhatsApp with a little blurb or a voice note. All right, make sure it goes to the whole team so they know everyone in the team's getting coached, even the best player. And we could say, you did X, Y, and Z. And wherever they were in a lecture, at home, watching TV, right, they had that video analysis with them. And then when we saw each other, they'd ask me a question, whatever they needed to ask, and we could talk about it. So there are ways and means to give feedback. You don't always have to have a team meeting. We also don't underestimate the power of YouTube. So every game, before every game in the Varsity Cup competition, I showed goals from Manchester United in the last minute with Alex Ferguson talking in the background. And I don't think it was a coincidence that we won 3 games in the last minute. So it really, I asked the players, does it actually help? And they're like, yeah, it motivates us a little bit. So there's something really, really simple that you can use in terms of technology. And then later on, we started to use this polar system, which is being set up outside. And ultimately, as you can see here, it just tracks the players while they're on the field. This was very, very helpful to us. So from a sports science perspective, they could track loads and so on and so forth. But for me, we could manage substitutions. We have rolling substitutions. So Justin would be on the bench and say, the player's in the red, he needs to come off, he's probably going to make a bad decision soon. We could get him off. I didn't have to make that substitution off. We can see when he's recovered to get back on the field. And that way we can manage our athletes effectively throughout the competition. It's also a couple of practical uses that we did find is that in a warm-up, we were doing 2 kilometers in every single warm-up. We were going, that's for some of us, as you can see, some of our strikers and midfielders, that's a full game. So after 5 days, just warm-up is an extra game in our legs. Straight away, we just cut the training warm-up to half of that and made sure we did less than 1 kilometer. So it's good practical information that I can use. Obviously, the sports scientists use it very, very differently. Again, in a competition, I had a player, one of my top players in a different competition, and halfway through, Justin came to me and he said, "Guy, I don't think he's doing enough work. He plays the most, he's doing a K less on load, and his heart rate never gets into the red." So when I approached the player and I said, "I don't think you're doing enough work on the field," he agreed with me. And he said, "No, I'm not. How do you know?" And I said, "Well, look at the data." And he said, "Well, actually, I don't think I'm fit enough for this competition. I'm trying to save myself for the end." So I said, "Well, you just needed to talk to me and we will manage you better on the field." And we did that. And ultimately, one of the reasons why we won the competition, I think. So there are many different ways you can use technology. I mean, my thing is just don't use it for the sake of using it. What do you get out of it? And make sure it's effective in its use. And then probably the next most important thing for me is I was privileged enough to chat to Paddy Upton a couple of years ago, and then he came and spoke here last year. And what he spoke about is the whole book approach. Now, too many times in the last competition, my players would look over to the bench for the solution in a game. And while we had the solution, by the time the information got back to them on the field, we'd either lost control of the game or, worst case scenario, we'd conceded a goal. And often, when we did discuss the what the solution to the problem is. We never trained it, so they didn't know actually how to execute it on the field, which was a problem. In hockey, we played PlayStation a little bit as the coach. I did all the thinking, like I'm playing FIFA. And that's not conducive to winning something. So as Paddy describes it, it's if I go into an exam and I've studied half the book, I'm most likely going to be nervous, and I'm most likely not going to do well in that test, and therefore I'm going to fail. However, if I've studied the entire book and understand that book, I'm confident. So I go and sit my exam, all right? I understand what's going on in the paper. I can answer confidently. I'm most likely going to do well. Not just pass, do exceptionally well. And if something's thrown in there that I don't know about, then I'll have the information to find the solution to that problem. So that's what we did. Every training session, we created tactical scenarios that would happen to us, and we created how do we solve that problem as a team. So we have everyone on the same page. So if this happens, this is how we react as a team. If this happens, this is how we react as a team. And we trained and trained and trained and trained in small-sided games and so on and so forth, so that every possibility that was thrown at us, we as a team knew the answer. Not 11 people making their own decisions. All right? We as a team knew that answer. All right? And to eliminate fear of failure, we never mentioned winning or the result or anything. All we focused on was do what you can right now. If you mess it up, get on, fix it. That's it. And the result will take care of itself. From a mental side, during the competition, we discussed all the scenarios. What's going to happen if we lose a game we should win? What's going to happen if you get sent off? How are you going to react if the umpires are poor? What are you going to do if we win the game? We spoke through all these mental aspects so that the emotions didn't come into it and create a problem. So every scenario that might present itself, we knew how we should react to that scenario so that it wasn't a problem later on. Then it's all nice to have all this stuff, but you actually need to prepare. Much like you need to have class tests to prepare for the exam at the end of it. All right? We had good preparation, so we had good competitions and good games that we could play where the opposition would test us. And then we could practically see if those solutions that we came up worked, and we could use video analysis to change them if needs be. And also, on top of that, we could see if they were the best solutions for the problem and practice them. This creates a little bit of ownership in your players. They start to feel like they're in control and they can make decisions on the field, not you. And it means when you get to a situation where the curveball's thrown at them, they don't all stop and look at you for the solutions because it's too late. They find a way because they have the information. So all I said is if you don't know what's going on, find a way within our playing principles. So you know what we play and what our team identity is, and fix the problem the simplest way possible. And later at the break or whatever, we can talk about it. But just do it. Don't worry about anything. Just do it. And if you mess it up, it's okay. We'll fix it later. And that, for me, was the most important thing. And it led to this. So this, for me, and this happens a lot in the tournament, but this is a defining moment, and no one actually thought about it. It's the first game against the University of Potchefstroom. It's in the first half of the game, right, of our competition. Just so that I can give you some background, in varsity hockey, a penalty corner, which is this, is 1 goal. A field goal is worth 2. In order for a penalty corner to be determined a field goal, it has to leave the 5-yard dotted area. Now, with me, we've got 2 great flickers, so I just go, if I was making this call, I would have said flick off the top and score and get 1 goal. They made the decision. Can you roll the video, please? They made the decision, and this was the outcome. It's obviously something we practiced. Nice and calm, because they know what's going on. Okay? And we managed to score. Now, it's so important, this, because it's worth 2 goals. And we ended up being 4-0 up. But they had a power play in the last 3 minutes and managed to score twice. And in a power play, all goals are 2. And the score went to 4-4, and we went to a shootout. Now, if they didn't make this decision, we would have lost 4-3. We would have lost our first game of the competition, and that sets the tone for the rest. We went to a shootout, we managed to win that shootout, which set the tone for the rest of our games. So that decision, if I had made it, we would have lost that game. And these happened throughout the competition. Again, this was the semi-final that we're in. We were up by 2 goals. It was a power play. There was 30 seconds left on the clock. You can see Wits have pulled their goalkeeper. We 1 goal up. Because it's a power play, now the penalty corner counts as 2. Please can you play the video? I just want you to watch my captain, Peebo, his reaction after this. Not a very good corner either, to be honest. I'm showing you all the bad things about it. 20 seconds to go. To make matters worse, we had 6 men on the field because we were trying to waste time, and we got so many guys sent off. So we were playing 6 against 11 with both of my flickers off the field. There was 10 seconds left on the restart. Peebo found a way. He managed to drive in here, and he got a penalty corner for us with 10 seconds to go on the clock. The next problem was we didn't have any flickers on the field. But he's done it before. He's practiced this moment. And also, can you roll the video, please? So 10 seconds to go, 6 against 11. We managed to take the hit off. Small moments. We managed to force our way into a semi-final out of nothing. Maybe it was the Alex Ferguson video, I don't know. All right? And a lot of people said, oh, you guys were so lucky. We weren't lucky. We'd been practicing for 2 years. Every training session, we play man down, 6v10. What happens if we're 3 men down and we need to score a goal? What are we going to do? That's what we did. What happens if the flickers aren't on the field? Who's going to step up? Who's going to take responsibility? By this stage, I wasn't even watching. I was out the thing. And we ended up, I was already moaning at my assistant coach, can't believe we blew a 3-goal lead. And they managed to do that. We forced a penalty shootout, and again, in the penalty shootout, all right, we had practiced for 2 years for this moment. Every training session, this player had one skill that he was going to execute. We had messed this up before, and every time it was because the player made a bad decision when he was under pressure. So we said, pick a skill, so when the pressure's there, you know that you're going to execute that skill, and then the crowd and the moment won't get to you. So we paid attention to detail on this. And this was the sudden death moment. Please play the video. Okay. It was a fantastic moment, probably one of the best games that we played in. But we got through to a final because of all the things that we'd paid attention to. And then, just in closing, when we went to the final, all right, we ended up I've written vindication there, and there's a reason why I've written vindication. It started as the culmination of all those interventions. But you as coaches know every decision you make is scrutinized. So actually, all my decisions are vindicated because we won. If we didn't win, then I probably wouldn't be standing here. So, but this is probably the easiest game I've ever coached in my life. We went to Stellenbosch, we were the underdogs. I was pretty comfortable that tactically we outplayed them, but there were 1 or 2 things that didn't really go our way, but it was okay. We had another bite at the cherry. We set up and we did tactical talks on the opposition and so on and so forth. But then when the game started, I didn't have anything left to do. I was basically a cheerleader on the side. And 3 minutes into the game, tactically we were supposed to make a big change. So from a full press, which is high energy, onto a deep press. All right? And 3 minutes into the game, no change happened. And I looked over at Peebo, I'm like, what's going on? And he just played and played. And when he came off for substitution, I said, well, why haven't we done what we spoke about? I said, Coach, we needed to make the decision. And if we were all over them and we were disrupting them and we felt we could keep going and we were in control of the game and we didn't want to come out because we would have given, that's fine, make that decision. At every break I asked, do you want to change? Do you want to change? No. I never gave any information. They made all the decisions. And at the end of the game, we won the game 5-0, it's actually 3-0, but we won the game 5-0. And I found myself saying to my assistant coach, I actually did nothing in that whole game. I didn't make one decision. They had made all the decisions themselves. And that again, that's why I say it was a vindication of all the decisions we had made. And probably the most poignant sort of moment came when we were having a few Coca-Colas in the change room afterwards. And my goalkeeper is a pretty intelligent person, came up and said, do you know what epitomizes this team for me? He said, every single team we've played against, they have one player in their team that's got the Man of the Match award more than on one occasion. Sometimes 5 or 6 occasions. In this team, Not one person here got a man of the match award more than once, which means the whole team pulled together. And that's probably justified why we were there at the end. I mean, I know it's sport and things can change, but those were the sort of little small differences that we put into our program to make it successful. Thanks very much.